Hello and welcome to the podcast. So I'm very lucky today to be joined by the one and only and very well loved Joe Bourne. Joe, thank you for making time out of your busy diary to join us today.
Thanks very much for asking me, Chris. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for coming on. So lots of people know you as the estate agent guru. Obviously, you've been an estate agent for 30 years and obviously helping people with your own business outside of that as well. So quick question to start off with, Joe. What makes a great leader in an estate agency business?
Great question, Chris. I think it's got to be somebody who, first of all, somebody with integrity, somebody with good self-awareness. They've got compassion. They are empathetic. They understand people. They like communicating. They like working with people. And for me, people are at the heart of it all. People come before profit. People come before, as an estate agent, people first, property second has always been. But as a leader, somebody who can communicate all of those and set a plan for a team and keep them organized and keep them on track, but help them to grow and develop and yeah,
What
all of
what
those
mistakes do you
things.
what mistakes do you see people make? Because I imagine in most estate agency businesses, some people set out to be the boss, but I'm sure that some people kind of just find themselves going up their career ladder and they start as a negotiator, lister. Oh, I'm a branch manager now. Well, I've actually got people below me who actually kind of I have to point in the right direction, sort of thing. So people who have sort of come into those roles more by kind of tripping into effectively. What are some of the mistakes you see them make day in, day out that might be hindering their team?
Um, I think if they get promoted into say a branch, somebody gets promoted, good lister gets promoted into a branch manager role, um, they suddenly are responsible for other people. They're no longer just about their results, it's about a team. So I think sometimes they forget to take account for who else they're working with and what those people are thinking. And actually, quite often, just to ask the team, what do they need? I think quite often we can, and people can forget to just ask for help and get opinions and collectively work out where they're going and what they need to do. I think it's very I say it's very easy, but yes, you're absolutely right. In our industry, particularly, people seem to get promoted because they're particularly good at putting houses on the market, and suddenly somebody goes, right, well, we'll make you branch manager. And that isn't necessarily what they want to do, but it's where traditionally, and I know things are changing, but traditionally where the money was, or traditionally where people moved. And just because you're great in somebody's living room doesn't necessarily mean you're great at dealing with those issues that can develop within a team. And I think just making sure that actually, is that really what you want to do? Do you really want to be a branch manager or an area manager or whatever? Or is that because that seems the only option to you in terms of career progression?
And how do you recommend that? I'm trying not to use the word boss because I'm not a big fan of the word boss. How do you recommend people that run have teams working with them? How do you advise that people manage those people? Because full disclosure, so I've, as we talked about before the podcast started today, I've just brought on two new members of the team. And so I'm walking that fine line between leaving them to get on with it and kind of going, I
Yeah.
trust you and I believe in you and you've been hired because you're good and you know what's what sort of thing. Also, I'm bouncing between there and sort of leaving them alone completely and looking like I don't care. So I actually had a video call with one of my team members on Monday, and I said, "Look, am I doing too much? I don't want to come across your mother like and kind of patronizing." She's like, "Just leave me to it. I know I'm doing. Any problems, I'll give you a call." And I was like, "Great, amazing. This is great for both of us," sort of thing. So how do you walk that line between sort of being their mother or father and then just ignoring them completely?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it, really, isn't it? I think first thing you mentioned, obviously, when you hire them, let's make sure we hire the right people. So sometimes I see people who've made the mistakes. They've got a gap. They've got somebody they need to fill. They need to fill that gap, and they hire too quickly, and they don't hire for the right reason, or they hire the wrong person. I think once you've made that decision that this is the person for your team, you have to then trust that that person is the right person. You have to work closely with them. But if you've made that decision, first of all, to recruit them, let's assume we've made the right decision. And then I think it's about clarity and communication, making sure that we don't set people up to fail, making sure they know what it is you want them to do. So for your example, the person that you've taken on board, do they know what you want from them? Do they know what your goal is? Do they know what your short, medium, and long term goals are? Do they understand, where your business is going? And if we take that into branch scenarios, whether that's sales or lettings, when we take somebody into a team, do we set them up properly? Do we make sure that when they arrive on day one, everything's working for them? They belong, they feel like they're part of that business to start with. And then do we induct them in the right way? And do we have a plan for them? So it's great that the lady that you've just mentioned has said, I'm fine, I'll let you know if I've got a problem. But I would still have regular check-in points, that because actually they might not want to tell you that they have got a problem or they don't understand something, because they want you to think, he hired me perfectly, I'm the right person, but what if I've got a problem? I don't want to let him know yet straight away. So having regular check-ins, I don't mean they don't have to be lengthy or anything like that. And having that dialogue so that people feel right from the get-go that it's easy to talk to whoever's hired you. It's easy to ask a question if you've got one. But then I would also make sure in certainly that first month, that there's some very clear touch points with people. If you're in a bigger business, I'm a big fan of buddying people up within teams and offices. So having somebody that is perhaps between the new recruit and the boss or the manager or whatever, so they feel that they've got a buddy there, but really setting out quite clearly what is expected from them, but also what they can expect from you. And I think having that in, and then also having, and you'll hear me and you'll see on posts I put very regular one-to-ones. I know there are people who like them, there are people who hate them, but for me, they've got to be a core part of your business. That doesn't mean it's got to be all about figures or this. It's how are you feeling? How's it going?
And
Tell
so
me what's going well.
how regular would be a regular one-to-one? Are we talking once a week, once a month, once a quarter? Where would you think it would sit? I
I,
appreciate it's a broad stroke
yeah,
here. So for most
I
businesses,
I think one-to-ones certainly once a month, very much so for everybody in a team, whatever that role is, whether they're full-time, part-time, or whatever. Um, I think when somebody's new and very new to a team, I don't think there's anything wrong with once a week having a bit of a let's sit down. How's it gone? How's your first week gone? What do we need to set in place for, has it gone as you expected it to do? Have there been any challenges that were not what you expected? Where we don't ask the questions, is the job actually what you thought it was? Let's get those elephants out of the room and have those conversations. If we've hired correctly and we've explained what's expected, I'm not saying they're going to get it all straight away, particularly if they're new to the industry, but if we've explained and then we have that very easy two-way conversation very early on, you can prevent a lot of those problems coming, or I think you can. And I think having that, but I certainly think one-to-ones should be once a month, a pretty standard format so everybody knows what's coming. And for me, I used to book them into my diary for my team on a quarterly basis. So they were there. You knew for the next 3 months the dates and times of your one-to-one. Ideally, if you can do that for 6 months, everybody's got a plan and you're working around holidays or whatever. And they don't get moved. They don't get moved. Come hell or high water, it's got to be. And they're usually, do you know what? And that's one of the things that really bugs me. They're often the first things that get moved.
sure.
Manager says, I'm busy, I haven't got time to do you one-to-one. Director says, I'm busy, Joe, I haven't got time to do you one-to-one. Whether we like them or not, we've prepared for them and we're psyching ourselves up for them. So don't move them. It makes you feel like I don't really matter.
Yeah, just being kicked down the road in the nicest possible way of putting that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whether you think it's a great idea or a terrible idea, what I've always done historically with any people who have joined teams I've worked with, I've always got them to go through either the sales process or the estate agency process from start to finish as if they're a customer. So therefore
Yeah.
they have to come forward to me at the end of it and say, what were your findings almost? And they're like, well, this bit's really good. When you came around to inverted commas value my house, or you
Mhm.
came around to drop the post valuation letter, that bit was really good. But then you're rubbish because you only called me a week later, hypothetically, to then follow up, and I'd expect something a bit sooner.
Mhm.
So I've always done that sort of start to finish process from sort of an outsider coming in because they get to learn the process from sort of day one of leaflet being delivered through to handing over keys, and
Yeah.
second part of it, they then have an understanding about it and what they can make changes to as well. And you get the value of that, and you go, actually, you're right. Actually, I should phone them quicker, or maybe I should do that letter by hand, and that's a good way. So, is that a good thing to be doing? Shall I continue to do that?
I think that's a really good thing, and I think that starts to build that whole bit of I have a part to play in your team, don't I? That way, you're asking my opinion. They're a fresh pair of eyes and ears. So I used to often send people who were joining my teams to go mystery shop the other agents. You can tell how long ago this is before we mystery shop online as well. But I did used to say, go in and register yourself and go and see how they are because this is who you're playing against. So actually, you've got a really good opportunity to do that, but you can also then see what you like and what you don't like. So yeah, absolutely. I think, get them to walking them through the customer journey. As you say, it's reinforcing your processes and their touch points, but also they might actually go, well, actually, Chris, why do you do that?
Yep.
Because we've always done something a particular way doesn't mean that we need to carry on doing it that way. Or actually, is there a different way or a different idea that we could try? Yeah, definitely. The
Good.
more,
I'm glad I'm on the right track on that one. They've not left yet.
yeah, I think the more we can involve people in our decision making. I mean, all right, teams can't make all the decisions, but the more we involve them, the more they have a feeling of ownership of wherever that business is going.
Oh, and in that case, you'll love my golden rule number two then. Golden rule number two for working with Chris Webb is that once a week you need to come forward with one suggestion to improve either the company or your own life in some way, shape, or form. So you might go, actually, our diary could be digital, or actually, you're wasting time by some sort of suggestion to come forward that we can take on board and action pretty much straight away.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. I'm glad that's two good ones. But
Yeah,
my third one for doing the Grand Slam Rule 3 now is turn your phone off outside of work hours. Because if you message me outside of your work hours, I'll be livid. So, just
that's really interesting because there's a lot of stuff kicking around in various groups at the moment about work emails on phone, WhatsApp groups, and I've worked with a couple of agents recently who uh, yeah, how do they manage their time? And I'm getting messages from customers on an evening. I'm getting this or that. We've got to draw boundaries. We've absolutely got to draw boundaries, and clearly mobile phones and email weren't really an issue for me when I first started in this business. However, we now live in this place where, I ordered something from Amazon this morning and it will be arriving very shortly. So everybody expects instant gratification. So if customers expect that or bosses expect it, where do we draw that line? Um, and people talk about this work-life balance, don't they? For me, it's more about balance because it might be that you're self-employed and you might choose to work first few hours in the morning, have a gap in the daytime to go to the gym or walk or whatever, and work in an evening. So then you will be answering your phone or looking at your phone at a different time to other people. But it's having that balance. So yes, I absolutely, and I wish more companies would, Chris, because I still think there is an expectation in a lot of places for people to be available.
I was having a good laugh with Dan Woods at the agency UK a couple of weeks ago. So he messaged me for the first time on my mobile on WhatsApp, and then he sent me an email afterwards saying, "Chris, just making sure this is the correct number for you on WhatsApp because I've sent you a message. I've only got one tick." Message about the next day saying, "Dan, my phone was on airplane mode. It was past 5 o'clock. I'm not getting that message." And he was like, "Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense." I'm like, "Yeah, 9 o'clock next morning it will turn back on, but until that time, it will not be in my pocket. Thank you very much."
I think there's a lot to be said. And now for some people, that doesn't work, Chris. There are some people who they have to feel that they've read their emails or their whatever. And rather than it being necessarily a hard and fast rule, and because it works for me or for you or whatever, it's working out what's right for them, but making sure they absolutely understand if they're employed by somebody that there's not an expectation of it, and making sure that they haven't got an unhealthy addiction to checking their emails every night or before they come into work on a Monday morning, because that suggests to me that there is more of a confidence issue or a problem or a worry or something if they're feeling that they've got to do that, or they can't go on holiday and hand off to somebody else. And I do remember that one very well.
Yeah, absolutely. In my mind, there's always more emails, there's always more WhatsApp, there's always more notifications, there's a sea of them coming in the future. So if I deal
Yeah,
with it tomorrow, no one's going to phone me saying my house is on fire. Can you come quickly, Chris? It's going to be minor issue I can deal with the next day. So for me, that
I
worked
think
very well.
I
But
think that's a great approach to have, and you know, hindsight's a wonderful place, isn't it? And as you get older, you change your views on things. But certainly, when I was in an area role, it took me a while to be able to not check my phone when I was on holiday, and then I reached a point of like, actually, I've recruited the right managers, I've got the right people, and whatever is going to happen is going to happen. I'm not going to be able to influence it. And once you start to do that, it's a different place, isn't it?
yeah, well, absolutely. So there you go. So you get an insight about how I am as a boss. Hopefully, it sounds quite good in the grand
Good.
scheme of things. I'm doing okay in the grand
Have
scheme of
you
things.
filled these vacancies?
No, yeah, I'll get all these CVs coming through. Um, so how do you get it with self-employed estate agents coming out there? So I'm not a self-employed estate agency, but I have a small
Yeah.
business in the grand scheme of things. And I always think that the hardest work in the business is generally the person who owns the business because they've got the most sort of skin in the game. It's their name over the front door if they're an EXP agent, for example.
Hmm.
How do you deal with that balance between, because I imagine lots of self-employed estate agents bring on their first member of staff onto their team and expect them to work as hard as they do, even though it's Chris Webb estate agents at EXP or whatever it might be, and are
Hmm.
somewhat harder on their staff because they're not working as hard as they do, even though it's not their business. And for them, it's more of just a job, inverted commas, whereas to
Hmm.
that estate agent, it's kind of their life because it's their business. How do people
Mm.
deal with that?
That's now that is a challenge, isn't it? And it's something that we're going to see more and more of as these businesses start to evolve and grow. I think you've got to take it right back to the recruitment point and the selection process first of all, and being really, really clear about your expectations, but also having a word with yourself as the business owner that actually this is your business, you're now expanding, and this is the role you're wanting to bring somebody into it. But if that person wanted to be you, they would have found a way to do that, or this might be a stepping stone for them to get there. So support them and help them, and they'll repay you in the right way. But you can't, and it is, and I hear this a lot from people of like, I've told them how to do it, I've shown them how to do it, so why aren't they doing it? Why can't they go get 45, 50% conversion? Because I could, or why aren't they getting those fees? But they're not you. And actually, we have to take that step back sometimes and go, okay, but you've hired them for a reason. So, what were their strengths? What was it you saw in them that was like, right, I want them on my team? And I always used to ask, you know, if you come into my team, what are you going to bring? What are you going to bring to my team? What am I going to expect from you? But also be very clear about what somebody could expect from me. And I think it is a hard one for business owners to perhaps get their head round a bit, but they do have to understand it's their business. There's a big difference. There's a big difference in terms of somebody coming to work with you. Now, show them where they can go and what they can do and how they're contributing to your business, and maybe set goals that, you know, I don't know, set ideas of where they can be with it, but certainly they're not you. So they're not going to do all the things that you want to do, because if they were that person, they'd be doing it for themselves, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I had a podcast with James Rowe a while ago, who's the MD at the Recruitment Experts, and he said, "Look, the number one thing that people ask for being recruited wise is, I just need another Chris. I need another me in the business, and that's like the number one request. They just need another one of them in the business. So therefore, they're kind of projecting that another one of me onto their new member of staff."
And that's, you know, we're all unique, aren't we? Yes, you can have a bit of a blueprint of what you'd like and you can look at your selection process, but they're not going to be you. But actually, what do you want that person to do? What skills do you want them to bring? And why? So I suppose again, it comes back to that bit when you are looking to expand your team and you are looking to maybe bring that first person on if it's a self-employed agent, or you are a bigger team and you're looking to bring more people. What gap is it? And what need is there in that team? And what skills are you looking for? Because you're not going to get another Chris or another Joe or whatever. But what you can do then is make sure that the coaching and the mentoring, the support you give them helps them to be the very best that they can be. And we spend time helping them to develop. But also, I believe people should want to develop themselves as well and
Absolutely.
have some appetite for growth that doesn't matter how old you are, there's always something new to learn. So I think that whole making sure you recruit the right people with the right mindset, the growth mindset, the curiosity, the wanting to grow. But then also, if you've taken somebody on board that they say to you quite clearly, I do just want a job, but I'll do the very best job for you in those hours that I work, then accept that and set very clear expectations and goals and rewards linked to whatever that is. Not everybody wants to be, people used to see this in branches, didn't you? They're a neg, they're a really good neg, and then they get promoted to be a valuer. Back to this whole following the money. They didn't want to go sit in somebody's living room. They didn't want that responsibility, but what they wanted was a car or some more money. So let's find out what it is that they really want and play to people's strengths. I think we make too many mistakes around that.
So you mentioned goals there, which is
Yeah.
segueing quite nicely onto my next question, if that's okay. So I'm sure I read a statistic a very long time ago, so this is very great. But generally speaking, the longer term goals you set for your team around you, the longer they'll stay with you. So if you set, monthly, weekly goals, for example, the turnover is fairly high. If you set, quarterly, yearly goals, they stay with you for the long term because they kind of see it as a long-term investment, a long-term play. How do you think that estate agency businesses can best align their goal and their staff goals so everyone's pulling in the same direction?
Involve them. Involve them right at the beginning of setting those goals, or when you're moving into a new year. So, God, we're already in June, so we're already thinking about exchanges for October, November. We'll be starting planning 2024, 2025's budgets, won't we, and everything shortly. So when businesses are starting to think like that, involve the team. It's not to say, we're going to stick by what everything that's said there, but what do they think? What's their view? Is the goal, is everybody clear whether they work 1 day a week or 6 days a week or whatever they are, whatever their role is? Do you know what the business goal is? It really does surprise me sometimes when I talk to people that they don't know. And they don't know what the expectation is for the branch in terms of number of new listings or sales or whatever that looks like. If you don't know where you're going, how do you sort of get there? But so I think to involve them in this is where we are at the start of the year, this is where we're going to, and this is how we're going to get there. We're going to break it down into bite-sized chunks because, if somebody tells me that I've got a book, I don't know, 10 valuations a week, 500 valuations a year, I'm going to go, oh, that's a lot, isn't it? But if I break that down to, well, actually, that's 2 a day, and this is how you're going to do it, it's manageable.
Yep. Oh, I
So
just find
I think
it's
it's a
kind of
great point, though, that the longer term bit, I don't think I've heard it said like that, but that makes complete sense to me. I've always
well,
believed in involving the team in goals.
Well, I guess it comes down to that. I'm going to pick some very round figures here to make my maths easier. We
Yeah.
want to bring in £300,000 worth of revenue this year. We've got three negotiators, right, guys? It's £100,000 each, sort of thing, and this is how we're going to get there. And I think that the key question there is how we're going to get there, because especially when you do sort of morning meetings, they go, right, what are you going to do today? And they're like, I'm going to sell one house, I'm going to get one market appraisal, I'm going to get one financial services appointment, and you go, great, how are you going to get it? And they go, oh, I don't know, I'll answer the phone, I guess. And you're like, no, that's the wrong answer. Like, you should say, right, I'm going to get one financial services because I spoke to Bob last week and he said he's going to give me a call back, get my market appraisal from Mrs. Jones, who I did a leaflet for last week, sort of thing. And just have that plan in place to say, this is how we're going to get it, rather than just sort of, I'll answer the phone and hope. It's about having that process in place off the back of it.
Yeah, and there are sadly a lot of people who live on hope. It's not a bad thing to have, but actually you can't run a business on hope. in the long term. You have to have a plan, you have to have a goal, but keeping it simple as well. I've seen businesses where they overcomplicate it, they make it really difficult. And estate agency, it's not rocket science. It really isn't. It's about people, and it's about having lots of conversations, and it's about listening to those conversations. And that then translates into all of those targets that you've got. If you're having the right number of conversations in the right way and asking the right questions, then those, you don't have to rely on hope.
How important is it to have strong team values throughout the entire company, from sort of the managing director, let's call it, through to the bin emptier, whatever it may be? How important is it to have core values for your business from sort of top to bottom in any estate agency?
I think it matters a lot. I think it matters. I think it matters a lot. And certainly, if I was starting out today with a new team or anything, one of my very first bits would be of like, what do we stand for? Who are we? What matters to us? And those things that would matter to me today would probably be very different to when I was working in, a corporate agency for 23 years. They would be very different to me, and my team would be aligned to those. But one of the exercises I do regularly with teams is like, what are your values? And if you go to a company and they're all on the wall, and I'll say, well, tell me about them. And it's great when you go into a business where they actually go, well, we do this and we celebrate this and we do the other. And you go, yeah. And the culture's there and you can see it and you can feel it. But you also know the other side is there, where it is we've got a vision and a mission, but do we actually understand where we're going? So for me, the values need to be, what you about? What do you stand for?
I
What's important to you?
I'm being very grey with this again, but I remember seeing it could have been a TV show, it could have been a podcast or something along those sort of lines. And they had the managers of the business and they had the staff of the business, and the managers all wrote down the core values of the business, and it was all very, monetary driven, and we must do this amount of revenue or whatever it may be. And all the employees wrote down what they thought the kind of core objectives of the business was and what the ethos was, a million miles apart. Absolutely a million. There was obviously a huge bridge between those two about what the bosses thought was going on and what the employees thought was going on. So how do people best bridge that gap so that everyone's on the same page? So they go, right, this is what we're about, this is what our goal is, and this is the direction we're putting in.
If you were in a business and that was where you were at that time, and you're over here and I'm over here as the team, for example, I would go, right, we're all coming into a workshop and we're all going to have some fun, and we're actually going to work out what we stand for, who we are, what's important to us. And I'd have, whether you want to use post-it notes or cards or whatever you want to do, but a list of words and statements and everything else. And I would get them to agree, and do this quite regularly. What's important? What's the most important, into 4 piles, and then scrap 2 piles, and then let's work out what we've got and we've all agreed on. And there can be quite a bit of bickering going on, and you've got to justify, and if you can only have, you know 5 values or whatever, you've got to negotiate with the team, because we've all got to be able to get to the same place. Then it's not a bad place to be, to actually go, right, what are we doing? Why do we want to do it? But how do those values then align to your internal and your external customers? That's what matters. And, for me, it's about being kind. It's about helping people. And actually, they would very much sit up there with, integrity for me. And what would that look like? Well, actually, how do we demonstrate that? How do we make that come to life? And how do people feel? So yes, I think they are pivotal. And I think they are more so now, Chris, than ever before, perhaps, as we get younger people coming into the workplace. The world is changing, and for the better, I think, in lots of places, in terms of people having a voice and being able to say what they want to do, rather than just, I turn up to work and I'm told that that's my desk and this is what I've got to do. And customers want to see things differently, don't they? And I think that, to me, is the way forward with people.
And I remember that my core value opinion has changed over time, should we say. So when I was at the property franchise group, I remember one day one of the MDs saying, right, we need to get the core values for the business sort of thing, insert about 15 eye rolls here. And I was like, okay, what do we stand for? No, it's unity and it's transparency and it's all this sort of stuff. But actually, now I've got my own business. what I think and what my team think are probably two very different things. And I actually see it as a really important exercise to go through so I can sit down with them and go, this is what we're about. Because I've been with the business since day one, obviously.
Mhm. Yeah,
And so therefore, what I think the business is and what I think we stand for and what we represent is probably completely different to what the guys have just started with. So it's very important for me to get across
yeah.
saying, look, this is what we're about. And it's not all super serious stuff. It's not all like, oh, we're going to be transparency this and whatever. It's more like we're here to do this. This is gonna be quite fun. We do this, this, and this. The answer is yes if in doubt. We all this sort of fun stuff. So for me, that is an exercise I've most definitely had on my list for the last couple of weeks or so, which I need to do, and that is
Yeah.
to get across the core values of the business to say, look, this is what we're about. If you're ever in doubt, look at those. The answer is probably going to be there.
And I think that absolutely. And I think if more businesses actually involve those, your values as part of the interview process in for companies, if they go, well, actually talk to me about these are our values, this is what we stand for. How are you going to demonstrate that? How are you going to live that? Does it fit with you? Because, well, some of the work I do, I work going into schools on careers and things like that. And some of the things we'll always say when to students is before you go for an interview, you research the company. So actually, if you research the company and you look at their values and you think, oh, that doesn't align with what I think, well, would you go and work with them? And I'm sure you would be the same, Chris, in your business now. There will be certain businesses or clients that, whilst they might ask you to go and work with them, they're not the fit for you.
Yep.
And you will say, I'm probably not the right person for you. And I certainly would do. That's again, it comes with time and age and all the rest of it, but being able to work with people that you do want to work with because they have the same values and the same ethos. So when people are recruiting people, looking at the values and what do they mean, and as part of that initial conversation to somebody.
And I would say that is my number one thing about being, I don't want to say the boss because it sounds very cheesy. Number one thing about being the boss is I get to pick and choose who I work with. And you're a bit of an ass. I'm not going to work with you. Very sorry. So there you go. I can say it.
Absolutely. And that's why you've made that decision to do what you do in the same way as I have. And
Yeah.
I think there's the other thing. I mean, there's two ways of that, isn't there? There was sometimes we go to see clients. I was with somebody last week and I said, part of what they asked me to do um, isn't something I would say is my forte. It's not what I'm the strongest at. So I'll be the first to say to somebody, I can do that bit, but actually I know somebody who's far better than me at that bit. And I'm not precious about that. And I think that's the important bit about if you know what's important to you as a business owner, if you know what's important to you in terms of values and you know what you're good at, then the right thing to do for people is to say, well, actually, you're better with somebody else to do that.
Yeah.
And that's just that's about who I am.
Yeah.
And I
I think,
think that sits with your values again, doesn't it? About being honest and having integrity.
Joe, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on today. I feel like
Thank
I've
you.
written down about 1,000 things about being a good leader and whatever else it may be. So I've given me lots of work to do. So thank you
I want
so
to
much for
hear all
coming.
about it. I want to hear from your team to see
Oh
how
God,
they're doing.
don't ask them. Joe, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been brilliant. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much, Chris. Take care.
Thank you, Joe.
Bye bye.